Today we are going to have a look at a philosopher called Immanuel Kant. This guy is quite a big deal in the world of philosophy. He's one of those, important big-brained men who has done a lot for bringing philosophy forwards. Now, his dates are just underneath my face here, 1724 to 1804. Hello, Lisa. And he is famous for a lot of different things. He's one of these philosophers who really took philosophy as a full-time kind of job. He's not just, a one-trick pony. He's not concerned in just one type of philosophy, but he sort of likes to bring everything together. He's a great synthesizer, is Kant. So when we talk about him, it's actually a useful way in to talking about other philosophers as well, because a lot of the things he does is react to other philosophers that came before him. So in that sense, he's kind of interesting too. So with someone like Kant, with all our philosophers really, it's difficult to sort of condense all of their life's work into 1 hour of a webinar. But I'm going to give it a good go today. I've picked two particularly important bits of Kantian philosophy that we're going to look at today. His idea about how we perceive things, how we know if data is true or false. So we're going to have a look at that. And also his basic principle of ethics. So how do we decide what is good and what is not, or how we should act? So there's quite a lot to sink our teeth into there. And like I say, we're going to use him to introduce a few more names that you might not know already, who might well have their own webinars in the future. But he's a good mixing pot, is Kant. All right. Yes, Izzy's here pointing out that his picture is smiling, which is not normal. He does look quite happy, doesn't he? Yes, he's a jolly fellow, is Kant, I imagine. And well, let's start there. Let's think about what Kant would have been like if we'd known him as a person. Now, normally I don't dwell too long on the personalities of these guys, but I think Kant's kind of interesting. He lives in a place called Königsberg, which actually I need to change my U to an E. Königsberg, for us Germans out there, which means King's Hill. This place, at the time when he was living in it, was a German settlement, or a Prussian settlement, I should say. Which was in what is now Russia. So he's German, the people around him are German, it's a German language area, but if we were going to look at it on a map, we'd say, oi, that's Russia. Yeah. It has a different name in Russian today. I don't think it's on the map anymore, but yeah, whatever. So Königsberg is this university town. So it's a place with a university where lots of people go to study and learn. And, so there's a good number of intelligent people that come from there. Philosophers, writers, poets, that kind of thing. It's that kind of a place. So it would have been quite a busy and happening place. Maybe not particularly rowdy. I don't know. But Kant, he very rarely left. A lot of other philosophers, they kind of, traveled around, went to different universities, spoke to different people, even maybe went and experienced different cultures than their own to try and sort of broaden their minds. Kant doesn't do this. Kant's quite happy to sit in his home and read books, poddle off to the university library, read a bit there, come home again. His life could not be described as massively exciting. He's a bit of a plodder, is Kant as well. He's not one of these philosophers who just sort of jumps out of the womb as a philosophizing baby, just sort of screaming and shouting about philosophy. He's someone that is incredibly intelligent, but really does have to suck up the writings of philosophers who came before him. And he doesn't just, read them and go, oh yeah. He reads them and he starts pulling bits from this one together and that one, which is why I call him a synthesizer. He brings together ideas from different philosophers and make something new out of them. Now, the legend about Kant is that every day he would have pretty much the same routine. Yeah, he'd get up, have a shave, do some reading, have breakfast, walk to the market, come back from the market, that kind of thing. And it said that he was so regular that the housewives of Königsberg could set their clocks by him. So they would know what time of day it was by, watching Immanuel Kant walk down the road to the market and back again, and then they'd know what time it was. Yeah, he's that regular. He's this kind of guy who he likes things just so. He likes his pattern. He likes his routine. And to be honest, I see where he's coming from. I'm that kind of guy as well. I'd get on quite well with Kant. As long as we didn't have to speak to each other too much, I suppose, get on with our own lives, our own little routines, we'd get on quite well. So Kant is, from a personal perspective, maybe not the most interesting of guys, but of course, with all philosophers, it's what's going on under the skull that's important and interesting to us. Oh, that's an interesting question. Was he autistic? I suppose maybe we would call him autistic today. He's the kind of guy who doesn't really do too well in social situations, maybe doesn't understand social situations so much. It's difficult to say, though, of course, because our term autistic didn't exist back then, and it's very hard to go back and put modern understanding on people from the past. But yeah, I suppose he's the kind of guy who sees the beauty in the written word rather than maybe the social interactions with others. So yeah, that could fit. That could fit. Now there he is in Königsberg, reading, going through his daily routine, which never changes. And so in some ways that's kind of dull, but in other ways he finds himself fighting in a war, or at least maybe wandering through the battlefield of a war that has been going on for decades, if not hundreds of years before him. He's reading the works of philosophers, some of whom are very ancient. We'll have a look at Plato in a minute and his influence. He's also reading more modern philosophers, and he's bringing them together. He sees this conflict. Yeah, there's two very distinct sides of this war that have formed if we're talking about the nature of reality. And he's reading works from both these groups, and he's trying to figure out, well, which of these groups is correct? The question is, what is real, and how do we know what is real? And the two battle lines, if you like, the two sides of this war, I've tried to summarize using two philosophers. So we're going to start here with Plato. Plato, the famous Greek philosopher, possibly one of the most famous philosophers, maybe after his master, his teacher, Socrates. But yeah, like I say, we might do full lessons on these guys in the future. But Plato is what we call a rationalist, possibly the first rationalist, or one of them. And rationalists are a group of philosophers, we can sort of clump them together in a group, who believe that knowledge comes from inside the brain, maybe, or at least there's some kind of underlying logic behind everything that can lead us to knowing what the truth is. Not necessarily just our brain, says Plato, but there's some kind of logic that is more than just our senses. It's not that we can't trust our senses, Plato would say. We can't go up and just, touch and feel and taste everything and work out what's going on with the world. We need to go further than that. We need to use the underlying rationale of logic and, in his case, the forms, to try and work out what's going on. So reality to Plato was not the reality that we find ourselves in today. Reality was, the reality that we find ourselves in today, so me talking to you here, Plato would say that's a shadow of reality. It's not reality at all. He believed that somewhere in the universe, maybe not in a physical place, but in a metaphysical place, a place outside, there were perfect forms for all things. And that's why I've got some pictures of horses here. Somewhere is the perfect form of the perfect horse, horsishness encapsulated as a horse. Imogen and Luke ask, am I a philosopher? I don't know. I am kind of a philosopher. I think we all are, though. I think you're philosophers too. So it's hard not to be a philosopher, to be honest. If you've ever sat down and thought about anything much, you're a philosopher. So yeah, there you go. So yeah, if we imagine that somewhere in the universe there's a horse, the perfect horse, like everything about it is just horse through and through, just pure odor horse. It's just there, horsishness. Now every horse that we see on Earth is different. Yeah. I mean, I've got 3 horses here. They're similar, but they're different. We've got a black horse, we've got a white horse, we've got a brown horse. I know horse people, they have proper names for their colors. I don't know them. Okay, that one's black, that one's brown, that one's white. That's what I'm going with. So because we have, says Plato, because there are loads of different horses out there, then how do we actually know what a horse is? We can't look at the black horse and say, well, that's a horse, because we can see other things that are horsey, which are different. So surely being a horse then is really hard to put our finger on. What is a real horse? Can we trust our senses? What if a zebra comes along? It looks like a horse, it sounds like a horse. When you poke it, it feels like a horse. It's not a horse though, is it? We call it a zebra. But why? I mean, what's the difference in that? It gets confusing. So Plato reckons, well, somewhere there is the pure horse. I mean, I can see there's horses in the clouds behind me up here. But there, thank you, Flick. I knew someone would know the proper colours of the horses. Okay, so we've got one that's called cream, one that's called bay, and the other one has a star. The brown one has a star. This is true. It does have a star. At least brown is a colour. I got that one right. Looks more white than cream though, doesn't it? Honestly. Anyway, I'm being distracted. Somewhere there's the perfect horse, and every horse that we see is a reflection or a shadow of that perfect horse, which is why they all look different, because none of them are perfect, because they couldn't be the perfect horse. There's only one perfect horse. Instead, they're just, there's a bit of horsiness in all of them, and there's enough horsiness for us to tell that they are horse, but they're not the pure horse. So if we were just to use our senses, we'd never quite figure out what a horse was. We've got to be tapped into this idea. There's got to be somewhere in the universe this logical idea of horse which is reflecting itself or emanating down to make the horses that we see. Oh, okay. Apparently I've got the colors wrong again. Sorry, Max. Now we can say the same for anything. We can say the same for a tree. Yeah, every tree is different. They're all different shapes, but we still call them trees. That's because somewhere in the universe there's the perfect tree, and all of the trees that we see are tree-ish enough for us to tap into that, to that perfect form. But it doesn't tell us what the truth is. Yeah. Izzy says that Christians say that God is the pure one and humans are in his image. That is a really good example, Izzy. Yeah. So I suppose that the Christian belief that God made man in his image, not exactly like him, yeah, but as a reflection or part of that sort of deity, that huge spirit, that does work. Yeah, yeah. So we could also use this about, this would explain for Plato how things like mathematics work. Yeah, we can think of sums that have no real relation to the world around us because there's some kind of underpinning logic of mathematics which makes us be able to always know the angles of a triangle from limited information, or always be able to add 2 numbers together, that kind of thing, because somewhere out there is the form of the number 4, yeah, or whatever. Circles are another good example. We could all sit down now and draw a whole load of circles on a piece of paper and they'd all be kind of circular. I'm guessing though none of us would manage to draw a perfect circle, and at the atomic level, if we went right down to any circle that has ever been created on Earth, none of them would be perfectly circular, because of course there would be little bumps and lumps on the atomic level which would they'd never be quite right. But somewhere out there is the perfect circle, which is how we understand that circles exist. Yeah, this is what Plato's saying. It's all about being rational, using your logic and relying on the forms. Okay, but that's one side of the battle that Kant is reading about. Some people think that our knowledge comes from the rational world, from maybe our brains or some external idea of logic that's underpinning us. Now, the other side of this battlefield, we're going quite a long way further in history here, is the Scottish philosopher Hume. Now, Hume is what we call an empiricist. He believes in empiricism, and he's probably the purest example of empiricism, maybe, in some ways at least. He believes that we can only really ever trust what our senses tell us. We cannot trust anything else. If we see it, it exists. What's that phrase? Pics or it didn't happen. I mean, literally in his case, it didn't happen. If you can't touch it, it's probably not real. If you cannot, experience it in some way with our five senses, then it's not a thing. It's not worth worrying about. Yeah. Now, Hume took this to some pretty extreme levels. That's a good question. Is air fake? No. So Hume, and that's a good example, Hume would say, of course, air is not fake because I can feel it going into my lungs. So it doesn't mean that he has to, use all five senses to be able to tell something. If there's a fire and I can't see it or feel it, I might still be able to smell the smoke and say, well, there is a fire. Yeah. So my senses, they don't all have to work at the same time. But I should be able to sense everything that's real. But yes, air is a good one because, of course, air doesn't work on many of our senses, does it? We kind of know it's there because we can kind of feel it, kind of taste it, I suppose. Although I guess we're so used to the taste of air that we don't really notice it anymore. But yeah. And so clouds, that's another good example. Clouds, we can see clouds. I can see a cloud right now. I'm looking out my window and there's a cloud. See, so I can trust the clouds are real because I can see it. This is what Hume says. Forget any weird ideas of there being a perfect cloud or anything that we can just work out with our brains, because nothing is reliable other than what we actually experience. Now this is good. Izzy asked, does he believe that God does not exist? Yes, Hume is what we would call a super atheist. He thinks any idea of religion is completely insane because he's never seen God, he's never touched God, he's never smelt God, he's never tasted God. So no, there can be no God. He would say something like, don't you waste your time thinking about things that aren't real. It's just embarrassing. You're embarrassing yourself. It's that kind of thing. He had no time for people to talk about God or Jesus or anything. Now, Rebecca, that's a really good point you're pointing out there. What about your imagination? So Hume reckons that you could imagine things, and that's fine, but it's just pure, it's imagination. I can imagine what I want. Doesn't mean it's real. Yeah, I can imagine unicorns. Sometimes what I can do is I can take, unicorn's a good example. I can take two ideas of things and I can squish them together in my mind. So I could think of a unicorn, a horse with a horn. Yeah, I'd take two things, shove it together. Doesn't mean it's real though. I could also imagine, I can imagine a Smurf. Doesn't make a Smurf real. I can look out the window and I can see the grass and I can think in my mind, I imagine what that would be like if it was bright purple or pink. Doesn't make it true, but I can imagine it. Okay, so this might be a hole in Hume's theory, of course. Now, he would go so far then as to say some quite famous things. He said, there could well be immortal people that do not die. Yeah, there could be a man out there that never dies. He will live forever. And we can't say for sure that that doesn't exist. Now, it might be that up to this point, every person that I've ever met or ever heard about, every one of them dies eventually. But that doesn't mean that that's necessarily the case for everyone. I just haven't experienced the immortal person yet. Yeah, he says there could well be. So we can't just sort of, we can't say that things don't exist because we haven't sensed them. Maybe we're just waiting to sense them. Yeah. He would also use the sun and a game of snooker as an example. He says, we have to rely on what our senses see. We have to only rely on what our senses see. We can sometimes make assumptions, but we can never be sure. So if we take snooker as an example, every single time that this snooker player has ever hit that white ball and it's hit the red ball then moves. Every single time he's done it, that's happened. Yeah. So that's quite trustworthy as a thing. But Hume goes further and he says, well, actually, There's no guarantee of that every time. Just because it's happened every time before doesn't mean it's going to happen next time. Maybe next time he hits the white ball into the red ball and the white ball bounces back. Maybe nothing happens. They just stay still. Maybe the white ball hits the red ball and the two of them combine and create a chicken. You know, just because something usually happens or has happened in the past doesn't mean it's always going to happen. Yeah, we need to take it a day and a moment at a time. We need to experience things as they come. Yeah. Now this is pretty hard line. I imagine you've noticed already. This is hardline empiricism. This is saying do not trust or believe in anything that you are not experiencing. Not even the basic idea of cause and effect. You know, white ball hits red ball, that causes it to move. That's an assumption that we make. And it's a safe assumption, Hume might say, because up to now it's worked every time. He used the same example for the sun rising. Yeah, every day the sun has risen for as long as Hume can remember, but maybe tomorrow it doesn't. You know, maybe tomorrow the sun comes back as the chicken of France. Yes, I mean, who knows? Yeah, we cannot guarantee anything because we can only trust what we're sensing right then and there. It might be that tomorrow the sun doesn't come up, all the grass turns pink, and you know, people start quacking instead of talking. And it would be surprising, but we'd have to just assume that that was the truth because that was what we were experiencing. Okay? So these are two very different sides. Hume is saying the only thing that matters is our physical, sensory experiences. I see it, therefore I know it, or I touch it, I feel it, you know, whatever. Whereas Plato is saying actually nothing that we see is real. Yeah, all of our senses are just false. They're just lies. You know, I can go up and I can touch that horse. It doesn't feel like the pure horse would feel. It doesn't look like the pure horse would look. Therefore, I cannot trust it at all. Maybe it's not a horse. Maybe it's a jaguar painted as a horse. Maybe it's a giant horse-shaped chocolate bar. You wouldn't know because you couldn't trust your senses. So these two are the extremes of our philosophical battle. That Kant is sat there in his room in Königsberg. He's reading the writings of all these people, and he's taking in both sides, really trying to understand it and trying to decide which side he's on. Yeah. Now, I've chosen two extreme examples here of our rationalism versus empiricism. In fact, in reality, most philosophers are somewhere in between. Yeah, they have a little bit of empiricism or a little bit of rationalism. You know, maybe they have a little touch from here and a touch from there. Most are more one way than the other. So you will have definite empiricist philosophers and definite rationalist philosophers. Kant is someone who's going to bring the two ideas together, though, and come up with something different. Okay. So, what Kant comes up with in his room in Königsberg, and according to the traditional story of this, he's reading through Hume again. He's read Hume before back in the day, and I don't know, maybe he's bored or maybe he's just got some questions, and he sits down to read Hume again. I mean, it's worth pointing out this guy, he's a plodder. Yeah, he's not just coming up with crazy ideas, sparking all the time. No, he's sitting there and he's carefully considering other people's opinions all the time. Now, from what we can gather, he didn't really agree with Hume the first time he read the book, but he still bothered to go back and read it again. I mean, how many of you can say that? I can't say that. Usually, if I read something that I disagree with, that's it. I'm done. I'll give it a chance the once. It's very rare. I can't think of any time that I go back and read something that I thought was a load of rubbish. But Kant does. He's quite sure that Hume isn't right, but well, how can he prove he's not right unless he properly gives it a read and really gives a thought about it? Now, he calls what comes out of his head the Copernican revolution, which is a reference to the real Copernican revolution. Copernicus, he's a scientist who figures out, or he's supposed to be the first to figure out, that the Earth orbits around the sun rather than the sun orbiting around the Earth. Yeah, and this was a big moment for science, which is why Kant himself called his revelation that he has while sat there reading Hume his Copernican revolution. The whole world flips on its head for him. he suddenly gets this idea which seems to work. Yes. Let's see. Now, Imogen or Luke makes a very good point here. Going back to our empiricism, since they have never met me, I may well not exist, which may well be true. I will put it out there, though, that if I am a figment of your imagination, people, then you want to start questioning what you're imagining, really. Imagine something different. I mean, if I was going to imagine something, it would definitely be a giant chicken breathing fire. It wouldn't be some boring guy sat around chatting about stuff. Whatever. So, what is his Copernican revolution? What is the big idea that comes to Kant? He asks himself this question. This is his big thing. What are the necessary preconditions for having any experience at all? He's found a problem. He's found a question, which often in philosophy can be the answer, or at least gets us towards the answer. He says, okay, we've got one group of people who are saying that we can only sense things. We've got another group of people that say that the senses are unreliable. And I kind of agree with both of them, because I have examples in my own life where my senses are unreliable. Descartes, someone who we'll do in the future, he talks about how you might be looking out the window on a rainy day and someone that you know is coming towards you, and you think, oh, look, there's Tim. Hi, Tim. But then as he comes closer, you realize, actually, that's Sandra. It's not Tim at all. Some other person, yeah? I was just fooled by my senses because it was rainy and a bit dark, and the outline of the shape, I made assumptions. We can't trust our senses. Whereas he'd also say, well, hang on, our senses must be doing something, because how can I rationalize the things that I'm how can I rationalize things without sensing something? If I am, let's say I'm sat there, I'm David Hume, and I'm saying that no, I'm Plato, and I'm saying that the only thing that's there is rationality. Then how do I know anything at all? How can I start thinking about myself in terms of external objects if I have no overarching idea, concept of the rational link between me being different from that? Otherwise, we'd all just sort of float around assuming that we are the universe. Yeah, we have to have some kind of rational thought that separates us from our surroundings to be able to understand that we have surroundings and therefore be able to sense those surroundings at all. So Kant, he brings the things together. And he thinks, well, okay, maybe it's a mix of the two, a synthesis. Maybe we need to have some kind of rational framework to understand the world of senses around us. Maybe we are being assaulted, our senses, all the time. We're seeing things, we're hearing things, we're smelling things, we're tasting things. There's one more that I'm missing. And it's all coming at us constantly. Then if we were purely sensual beings, if all we did was just sense things, we would just kind of flob around going, just noise, color, sound, smell, feelings. It would all be a bit much, yeah? But if we were purely rational, then nothing would make much sense because everything would just seem strange to us. So it must be some kind of difference in between. We must have a rational system by which we are hit by things from the senses, and then our brain, or possibly something else, but we'll go with the brain for now. Our brain then sorts out those senses, those sense perceptions, and says, okay, well, that is a dog, and that is the smell of chips, and that is the feeling of rain, and that is the sound of music. Yeah, not the film. That would be weird. I mean, it could be that you're watching The Sound of Music, but yeah, that's a distraction. So his Copernican revolution is this question: what do we need to have any experience at all? What rational thought processes do we need to have in order to experience the things through our senses? We're bringing the two together, yeah? And it sounds kind of straightforward. I mean, I'm sure a lot of you got there whilst I was talking about these two things, that actually there's probably some kind of balance in between. But for Kant, he's the first person to really put this down. Charlie, you point out that I am obsessed with chickens today. I seem to be obsessed with chickens. I wonder why. Freud could tell me. We'll do one on Freud soon. But anywho, now, what Kant then does in his very Kantian way, is he doesn't just say, okay, there's a mix of the two. He goes a lot deeper. Now, we're going to try and scratch the surface of this depth. You know, I'm going to try and talk you through this a little bit here. But he breaks down everything that we can know or understand or sense into 4 categories, each with 3 elements to it. So we call this the 12 categories in all. Yeah, and these are our 12 boxes here. These ones here. Kind of ignore the blue ones for now. So he writes this very dense book in 1781, and in there he is trying to work out, okay, how do we know what is what? How can we form a framework to catch the sense information on? And he comes up with these 4 categories of 3 each. So our first one is quantity, being able to count things. You know, is there one thing? Are there many things? Or are we looking at all things together? Yeah, so we start to think about number, okay? We've then got quality. Is something real? Is it actually not real? So can we disprove it? Is it something that is not a real thing? Which would also fit into our, you know, we need to know what is not real to understand what is real, if that makes sense. I need to know that when I'm lying in bed at night and there's a creepy sound and I'm thinking, oh no, it's a ghost, maybe the ghost of a chicken. I need to be able to know, hang on, actually, there are no chicken ghosts, and there certainly isn't one in my house, and so I need to be able to disprove things as well. I also need to be able to understand the limitations of what I'm thinking about. So, you know, could this, you know, is this going to be, you know, I hear the weird noise, I might think to myself, oh no, that weird noise is a tsunami coming for me. You know, that creaking sound is a tsunami. But then I think, hang on, no, it can't be really, because, you know, I know that tsunamis exist. I have experience perhaps of a tsunami, but actually I'm living on the top of a mountain in Bhutan and I'm not miles away from any sea, you know. So there are limitations to what I might be experiencing. These are all, these words, the way that I'm explaining them are quite simplistic. You know, there's a whole load more facets to all of these, but you know, I'm trying to give you the basics here. So then we need the relation between things. So inherence is something a property of, you know. You cannot have a married bachelor. A bachelor is someone who by definition is not married. Therefore, if I start talking about a bachelor, I instantly know that there must be the concept of this person not being married. Yeah, I cannot use the word bachelor otherwise. So some things are inherent properties of others. We've also got causality. Back to Hume with our snooker balls. There are relationships between things. One thing causes another. The snooker ball, the white ball hits the red ball moves. That's a causation effect. We've also got correlation, so things that relate to other things. So things working dynamically together, you know, in different ways. So our last group of categories are our modalities. So is it a possibility? Is it a necessity? Or is it a contingency? So is the thing that I am sensing or experiencing or wanting to interpret in my mind, is that something which is a possibility? Is it something that might happen? Is it something that is definitely going to happen? It's just a fact. Or is it something that might happen in a strange situation? Is it something that I could make happen maybe? Yeah. So these different categories, they go together in different ways. And these are the rational framework that Kant says everything that we sense, everything that we know, whether it's a purely rational fact or a purely sense fact, we have to siphon it through these things. We can ask ourselves these questions about things, and we'll tick the boxes and you know, make sense of the world around us using these frameworks. So let's think. I mean, I've started down the chicken track. I mean, we're going to stick with the chicken. So I see an animal. I think to myself, well, you know, what is this? I might get the idea of chicken. What's going on in my head? I might be breaking it down. I might be saying, well, look, that's one thing. Okay, maybe there's a whole flock, but no, we're looking at one chicken here. So we'll say, yes, that's a singular thing that I'm focusing on here. I could use my ideas of quality. I could think, well, well, at the moment, I'm in a chicken farm. I'm looking at this chicken, seems pretty real. It's definitely not a shark. I could negate that. I could say, look, my knowledge of my senses says that this one cannot be a shark. Sharks and chickens, quite different. Don't get them confused. You don't want to try and grab an egg out of a shark. You lose a hand or something. Then we could put in our limitations. We could say, well, okay, I suppose it could be a robot that someone has dressed up as a chicken, but that's highly unlikely. So, the limitation there, it means that it's unlikely. I mean, and that comes over to possibility. But I could also say, well, okay, I'm in this area in a chicken farm. There's a high chance that, this has been caused by the environment around me, i.e. there are chickens and eggs around this place, so there's a cause that relates to this. Correlation of chickens being in chicken farms, that works. Inherence, well, it makes sense that this chicken, it's got everything that a chicken needs. I can see its feathers, I can see its beak, it's making that chicken noise. Maybe I go up to the chicken and I kind of rub my face in it and I'm like, yep, smells like chicken. I can work that out. And then I can start to work on the modality of this thing. Where are we in the possibility stakes? Once I've used all those other senses and I've thought about the context and the location, then yeah, the possibility of it being a chicken is pretty high. I could even maybe bring up some proof by maybe it would be quite violent, but I'd have to possibly cut open the chicken to check it's not a robot. I'm not going to do that. But I'm putting all these things together, and it's these things kind of rationally thinking through my senses that are giving me reality. Yeah. And Kant says that we're doing this all the time with our minds, unpicking all of our experiences, putting them on a rational frame and understanding them. So he's a little bit of Plato, he's a little bit of Hume, he's a little bit of rationalist and a little bit of empiricist. He's bringing the two together. And he's trying to work out how we experience anything. There you are. Well, Seren asked a philosophical question. Is she invisible? Probably not. But I cannot see you, so maybe you are invisible. Tricky. Some strange comments in the chat here. So we'll leave reality for a moment, and we'll come up to the second of maybe Kant's grand theories or philosophical ideas. Hopefully your minds are not too scrambled by that so far. I mean, of course, if you want to get the lowdown on the 12 categories, please do read Kant. It's eminently doable. Have a go, and you'd probably understand it in a far better than my gabbled explanation just then. But it's not just reality that Kant is interested in. He is also interested in morals. What do we do that is right? How do we know what is right? That's true, Flick. Yes. This whole thing could just be happening in my mind. Let's hope not. There's too many chickens in it to be healthy. So, this is a similar idea now that we've got to the idea of reality. If we've got two conflicting sides, we've got rationalism and we've got empiricism, logic and sense data. When it comes to morals, Kant saw that by reading other philosophers again, in his nice comfy study in Königsberg, he starts to see another battle between the philosophers, if you like, between moral ideas. And our first moral idea is deontology. Now, and there's loads of philosophers that fit into this, so I'm going to kind of take this away from specific philosophers and focus on the concepts here a bit. But deontology says that there is a moral code. Okay, there is a list of right and wrong, and a good example of this would be the list of the 10 Commandments sent down by God. Okay, it's quite straightforward. They have been given to us by a higher power. They are absolutes. So on the 10 Commandments, it says, you shall not kill. It doesn't say, you probably should not kill. It doesn't say, we would greatly thank you for not killing today. It doesn't say, you shall not kill unless the person you're killing is a complete muppet. Yeah, it doesn't say that kind of stuff. It's quite straightforward. I mean, it's written in stone. It's, you shall not kill. There's only so much wiggle room you've got there. So an absolutist would say that somewhere there is a list of rules, and any breaking of those rules would be terrible. Yeah, it would just be wrong. No matter what excuse or good reason you can come up with for breaking said rule, it would be wrong. Now, these rules can come from a religion, and for most of history, that's probably where they've come from. But they could also be from maybe a king or a political ruler. So maybe the government says, these are our 500 rules, from everything from like filling in your tax returns to not stabbing people with forks. These are the rules. Anyone who breaks any of these rules, you go straight to prison, or we kill you, in the most extreme case, maybe. Don't break the rules. Yeah. Like Hammurabi in old Babylon. Yes. Now, so this is a form of absolutism. Yeah, we have rules. If you break them, you are bad. There ain't no discussion. Yeah. Now this is very inflexible, because, well, there's not much wiggle room there. Yeah. Now, let's take one of those 10 commandments. Thou shalt not lie. Yeah. Do not lie. An absolutist person would say that any lie, therefore, is wrong. It just is. And so if I was lying under any circumstances, then I would be a bad person. Yeah. So let's imagine a scenario where, I don't know, there's a really dangerous and violent person who's, let's call it's a monster, a horrible monster. Yeah, great big teeth and claws, maybe like some kind of troll or something. I don't know. It's horrific. And it's stomping through your village. A monster chicken, maybe. Yes, why not? It's stomping through your village, and it's very politely stopping and asking everyone, excuse me, I'm a giant monster chicken. I have come to eat your children. Could you please tell me where your children are? Are your children here? Now, for most people, if you're not a moral absolutist, you would probably come up with some kind of lie. You would probably say something like, oh, my children are not here. My children are, in the next village over there. Maybe you want to go look that way? My children are hiding in that volcano, Mr. Chicken Monster. Go away. That kind of thing. For an absolutist, though, that would be the wrong thing to do. This chicken monster has asked you a direct question, and you have lied. The only correct thing in that situation would be to say, hello, chicken monster. My children are there hiding under that bed. Have at it. See, that's really difficult. A moral absolutist is very much straitjacketed. Yeah, they can't be flexible. Now, Kant, he's reading about, moral philosophers who are talking about absolutism, and they get their ideas from loads of different places. Some of them are Christian, so they will bring their morals from, the Bible. That's got the rules in it. Others are from other religions and will have, Quran will tell them what the rules are or whatever. Some of them are just people who have come up with their own series of rules. Maybe it's like the rules of, the king of Greece or whatever. Yeah. That might well be something that follows as well. But anyone who's an absolutist gets a bit stuck because you cannot wiggle at all. Yeah, you're kind of stuck. There's not much you can do if things start to go wrong. If the great big chicken monster comes, you basically got to tell it where your children are, and then your children are going to be eaten, and then you're probably going to be in trouble with your wife because, well, you let the kids be eaten by the chicken monster again. Now, the other side of the argument would be what we've got here with old Yosemite Sam, consequentialism. Now, consequentialism is a bit more relative. Consequentialism says, well, it doesn't really matter what you do as long as the consequences are okay. Yeah, so maybe when we're trying to understand what the right thing is to do, we need to take it situation by situation. I mean, there's a Christian theory called situation ethics, which fits right in with this. But as long as it ends up okay, then we're all right. So the chicken monster comes to the village, it's pecking around, it's asking very politely, where are your children? A consequentialist would say, well, okay, we've got some consequences that we need to weigh up here. If I tell the truth, which is the right thing to do, we can all agree, maybe, that telling the truth generally as a principle is right. If I tell the truth, then will that mean that my children get eaten by a chicken monster? Hmm? And is my children being eaten by a chicken monster a worse consequence than me having told a lie? Yeah, and deceiving this what it seems to be genuinely quite an upstanding chicken monster. I mean, he's polite. He's not being rude about it. He's being very polite and asking nicely. So it would be wrong to lie in general principles, wouldn't it? But we do like the children. So maybe, and Flick in the chat there, you said, what about violence in self-defense? Yeah, so maybe it would actually be the best thing, even though it's morally wrong to kill also, maybe the best thing for me to do would be to gather up with the other brave men and women of the village, pick up our pitchforks and stab that chicken monster to death. I mean, the consequences there are very good. We've got safety for our children for, until the next chicken monster comes along. We've also had quite a good workout. Maybe we've built up our monster combating skills, plus chicken dinners for like a month from a giant chicken. I mean, the consequences are actually pretty good, except for the chicken, of course. The chicken monster ain't enjoying that one. The chicken monster is dead, and we have broken that basic idea of thou shalt not kill. I mean, to be honest, I don't know what the Bible says about chicken monsters. I'll have to reread and find out for you guys. So this is a very relative idea about morals. What we're doing here is we're trying to work out what is right and what is wrong based on thinking about the consequences. Now, another example of consequentialism would be utilitarianism, which is another whole brand of ethical philosophy, but it's worth a mention here. The utilitarian rule says that, in essence, I should act in a way, everything I do should be geared in a way towards making the most people the most goodness or the most happiness. I mean, there's different ways of saying it. So me killing the chicken monster, that is undeniably bad for the chicken monster. I mean, the chicken monster is going to have a terrible death as me and my mates stab it with pitchforks. The chicken monster is also, it's lost the rest of its life. It's terrible. But I'm only harming one person, the chicken monster, whereas if I let the chicken monster wander around and eat the children, then I'm harming all those children that it's going to eat, all the children that it might eat next week in a different village, all the parents and friends of those children who have been eaten, who are now, upset, as you probably maybe would be. So all in all, if we've got like imaginary scales here with happiness for one against happiness for all, probably with utilitarianism, it's probably best to kill the chicken monster. This leads to difficult situations though, because, well, I'll see what you think here. We'll do the classic, the trolley problem. Imagine that you are, it's called the trolley problem because a trolley is like an old word for a tram or a train, but imagine that you're a train driver and you are going along the tracks, and there in front of you, there are 5 people. They've been tied up, they are on the tracks, you are going to run them over. You cannot stop the train, it's impossible. Yeah, there's just not enough time. You could press the button all you liked, you're still running these people over. Now, what you do have time to do though, is you notice that there is another little side track. Yeah, you've got time to press a button which will turn your train, it will take it off of the track, off the direction that's going to kill these 5 people, and it will go onto a different rail where you will definitely kill one person. Definitely. Yeah, they're there. So you can see this. The question is, do you press the button and change the direction of your train, killing one person, or do you keep to the course that you were on and kill the 5 people? Let's see, what do we think? Yeah, please let me know in the chat whether you would do. So Marina's going for the one person. Okay, that makes sense, yeah. We got 1, 2, kill one. Oh, most people are saying kill the one person. Okay, yes. Charlie says just stop imagining and then you won't be killing anyone. Yes, that's a good way of putting it. And then we've got people coming up with alternatives, jump out of the train, push the people away. Now this is an important point here. Max says, well, it depends who the people are. Okay, so let's change up the scenario. Let's say that the 5 people are convicted criminals. Yeah, they're all wearing prison uniforms. And the one person is your mum. Does that change the balance? Do we now? Now we kill the 5 and we leave the 1, maybe. Yeah, I mean, yeah, people are changing their mind. And then we come to an even trickier problem. Well, how do we decide? I mean, assuming we're making this decision in a very short amount of time, we're on the way. There are 5 people. There is 1 person. Which way are we going to go? We haven't really got time to sit down and plan this out. But how would we ever know whether, yes, we might choose to kill the 1 over the 5, but it might turn out that the 5, they go on and have lovely lives and they're good people. Brilliant. And I've saved 5 lives. That's brilliant. But maybe that 1 person was just crossing the train tracks, not really thinking about it, not really worried, because their head was full of the cure for cancer. Yeah, they're walking around. They've just got it. Just then, just as they step onto the train track, eureka! I've just finished cancer. I've done. And then whoop, in comes your train and they're dead. I mean, what have we done there? Have we made the right decision if we're going for 1 and 5? It's really, really hard. I see people in the chat here trying to wiggle out of this trolley problem. That is not the point of the problem. We've got to choose between the 5 and the 1. So it might well be that consequentialism is too flexible. Yeah, because we never fully can understand the consequences that are coming. Then how can we ever make an informed decision? My favorite example maybe of consequentialists are certain forms of Mahayana Buddhism. Now in Buddhism, there are some very strict rules. Yeah, don't do this, do that kind of thing. But there's also a group within Buddhism, Mahayana Buddhism, who say, okay, once you reach a certain level, once you've been a Buddhist monk for years and years and you have transcended to enlightenment and you've really got this down, then you can go around and break the rules. So the better you get at it, the more you can break the rules. And this is because it's understood that if you had reached enlightenment, then you would understand the consequences better. I mean, classically, the classic example is, if I had a time machine, I'd go back in time and I'd kill Hitler when he was a baby. I'd stop the whole World War II thing. I'd stop the Holocaust. Everything would be great. But for a Buddhist or someone who's trying to deal with consequentialism, what are the ripple effects of that? Yeah, the ripple effects to time and space, but also the ripple effects in society and culture. And, would we actually end up in a worse situation? So in this form of Buddhism, they say, well, maybe if you're an absolute genius, you've hit enlightenment, then you can start making those choices. But anyone else, any normal Buddhist or any non-Buddhist person, you're not in a position to make these choices. Yeah, you cannot go and break the rules just because you think the consequences are going to be better. It might well be that you make things worse. It certainly will be that bad things happen. I mean, you would you kill a baby? I mean, forget that the baby is Adolf Hitler. You're killing a baby. I mean, surely to our moral absolutists, our deontologists, they would say it's just wrong. Yeah, it doesn't matter what that baby's going to grow up like. Killing a baby is clearly on the list of things not to do. So we'll just stick with that, thank you. Yeah, but you see the play that we got here. Now Kant, to come back to him, he kind of finds a middle ground. He goes a little bit towards the the absolutist deontological side of things. That was harder than it should have been, wasn't it? Oh, good question here from Marina. What if the baby has a deadly contagious disease? Ah, put the baby out of its misery. Save humanity. I mean, you know how this goes. It's really tricky, isn't it? But Kant's answer is the categorical imperative, which, well, is this. It's on the screen. There is, therefore, only one categorical imperative, one thing that we have to do when trying to decide what moral act to do. And it is, act only according to that maxim by which you can at the same time will that it should become a universal law. Now that's a fancy way of saying, what would it be like if everyone did that? Just said that, really. So let's imagine, let's go for lying, yeah? Maybe I'm talking to someone, we're having a chat. Maybe it's not about anything interesting. Maybe it's about, I don't know, they're asking me, I've been playing a computer game and they're saying to me, what level did you get to? I don't know if computer games have levels anymore, whatever, I'm old. And I say, oh, I got to level 26, but really I only actually got to levels 3. I'm not very good at the computer game, but I'm trying to, make it sound better. Now, directly, no one's going to be hurt by that. Maybe the person thinks I'm slightly better at computer games than I really am. I mean, no harm done, yeah? But Kant says, no, you need to think about this in terms of a universal law. So if we say that it's okay to lie and then everyone starts doing it, would that make the world a good place or a bad place? And to be honest, if everyone starts lying, that would make the world a really hard place. So I would not like it if it was a universal law that it was okay to lie. Yeah, that doesn't work. People are going to be ripping me off all the time. They're going to be selling me things. Here, have this lovely box of sweets. I take it home. It's an empty box, or a box of worms. They lied to me again. Yes, Izzy, there are a lot of liars out there. This is true. But we can probably imagine the world would be a better place, on balance, if no one lied, yeah? So Kant says, if we can make it a universal law in our head, then that's probably the way to go. What would it be like if everyone did it? So there are other laws. So I don't know, some people, they like to have gravy on their chips, yeah? I am not one of those people. I think this is a bit weird, okay? So let's take the same example. Let's say I think it's wrong to put gravy on chips. And now I imagine a world where it's a universal law that you should not have gravy on chips. And on balance, that doesn't really change the planet, does it? I can do it the other way. I can say, everyone should always have gravy on their chips. Now that makes life a bit harder. What if you're allergic to gravy? What if you are someone who just hates gravy and is therefore never going to be able to eat chips again? If I make that a law, then that starts to infringe on the universe, on humans. Yeah. So the rules that you should never put gravy on chips probably wouldn't hurt anyone. I could probably make that a rule and it'd be okay. And then therefore I could never put gravy on my own chips, but always could infringe on people. So that would make it harder. Yeah. Now, yes. What if you could only eat gravy on chips at all? Yeah, quite right. So Kant, he's doing his little thing again. He's taking two big ideas. He's trying to combine them a bit. Yeah. He's saying, look, yes, there should be absolutes. There should be some definite rules out there. But Kant was never one, and his relationship with religion and God is interesting. We could probably look at that in the future. But Kant would say, look, we shouldn't just take a list of rules like our absolute deontologists. Oh, it's so embarrassing. Like they do. What we need to do is, that would be too restrictive. We can't just take this list that's been given to us by God or the king or whoever. Also, we can't just make our rules up on the fly because we're going to end up in a mess. So we'll use a bit of rationality to come up with a sensible list of rules. This is it, the categorical imperative. Let's take each situation as it comes, but let's think to ourselves, if I do this and everyone else did it, would that be okay? Would I like it if everyone went around flicking me with elastic bands? Probably not. So I won't do it to other people. Sounds like a good idea. All right. So that is Kant, or at least a bit about Kant. We'll probably come back to Kant because he's quite a big deal. But hopefully that gives you an idea of what Kant is doing and thinking about. quite deep stuff. All right. Thank you very much, guys. Wonderful to see you all again, and I'll see you soon. Adios.